Welcome, dreamy soul. Tonight, I'll be your narrator, here to gently guide you toward calm and restful sleep. Before we start, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more relaxing bedtime stories. Share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. And if there's a story you'd like me to tell next, I'd love to hear your suggestion. Now, let's begin. I'm just a regular person, a librarian actually, but I spent every summer of my childhood at my grandparents' old farm. It was a place where generations of our family gathered, especially all the cousins. For over 20 years, I've seen the way family can bond, the good times, the laughter. But I also saw the secrets, the quiet looks, and the things nobody talked about. You learn that some connections run deeper than blood, and some shadows stretch further than you can imagine. But here is what keeps me coming back year after year, despite the constant danger and isolation. The Vance farm wasn't huge, but it felt like a whole world to a kid. A big farmhouse, a red barn, and fields that stretched out to dark woods. The air always smelled like fresh cut grass mixed with the rich earth after summer rain. Inside, the house creaked and groaned with every step. Dust motes danced in the sunlight that streamed through old windows. My cousin Thomas was always my shadow. He was a year older than me, quiet and a bit strange even then. He had eyes that seemed to see more than most, a deep, unsettling blue. We'd spend hours exploring the woods behind the barn, making up games, building forts. It was our routine, our summer ritual. The woods were always alive with the buzz of insects and the calls of birds. Sometimes, a deer would rustle through the undergrowth. One particular summer, when I was 10 and Thomas was 11, things started to feel different. It began subtly, like a shift in the wind before a storm. Thomas, who was usually eager to lead our adventures, became withdrawn. He'd stand by the window, staring out at the woods for long stretches, his face unreadable. He'd just shake his head if I asked what was wrong, a faraway look in his eyes. He stopped wanting to play. Instead, he'd sit in our fort, silently carving strange, looping symbols into the damp earth. They made my stomach feel tight. Maybe he was just getting older, I told myself, but it felt like something more. The woods, which had always felt like our safe, secret kingdom, now seemed to watch us, silent and waiting. The first truly unsettling event happened a few days later. We were in the woods, not playing, just sitting. Thomas was carving again, deeper this time. The air was thick and heavy, not a breath of wind. It was unusually still. The birds had stopped singing. Suddenly, Thomas looked up, his blue eyes wide, staring past me into the deeper trees. He didn't speak, but his body tensed. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, his voice thin and raspy. I strained my ears, but there was nothing. "No," I said, a shiver running down my spine. He just stood up slowly, his gaze fixed. Then he pointed. "There," he breathed, almost too quiet to hear. "Someone is watching us." I looked where he pointed, but saw only dense trees, their leaves rustling just a little. My instincts were screaming that something was wrong. This wasn't Thomas playing a game. This was real fear. The next few days were worse. Thomas started talking to himself, muted words I couldn't understand. He traced those strange symbols on the farmhouse windows, on the dusty floorboards. My grandmother noticed it too. She'd give him worried glances. He just wouldn't talk. Then objects in the house began to move. Small things at first. A teacup on the kitchen table would shift. A book on the shelf would be on the floor. Everyone blamed it on the old house settling or the kids being messy. But I knew. I saw Thomas watching these things, a strange mix of fear and knowing in his eyes. He never admitted to moving anything, but he didn't deny it either. He just watched. The climax arrived during a powerful summer storm. Rain lashed against the windows, thunder boomed, shaking the old house. The power went out. My grandmother lit candles, their flickering flames casting long, dancing shadows. Thomas was sitting by the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket, rocking back and forth, whispering those strange words. Suddenly a crash came from upstairs. We all jumped. My uncle, a big, brave man, grabbed a flashlight and went to check. We heard his heavy footsteps, then a choked cry. A moment later, he came stumbling back down the stairs, his face pale, covered in dust and cobwebs. "The attic door," he gasped. It was wide open. And there was a smell. He didn't say what kind of smell, but I caught a whiff of it from him. Old dust, something metallic, and a deep, earthy scent, like something rotting beneath fresh soil. It was the same smell I'd started to notice faintly on Thomas's clothes. Just then, Thomas let out a piercing shriek. He pointed a trembling finger at the attic stairs, eyes wide with terror. "It's here!" he screamed. "It followed me." As he spoke, the candles flickered wildly. A cold wind swept through the living room. A heavy, sickening thud echoed from the attic, a sound like a large sack of dirt being dropped, but softer. Then we heard it again. Thud, thud, getting closer to the top of the stairs, slowly, deliberately. The air grew impossibly cold. I could see my breath. My grandmother started to pray. Thomas was on the floor, curled into a ball, shaking uncontrollably, still whispering. His eyes, though, were fixed on something only he could see. At the top of the dark staircase, I felt an invisible weight pressing down on me, a presence so huge and ancient it filled the whole house. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The thud-thud kept coming, drawing nearer to the stairs. I could hear a soft scraping sound now too. A dark, misshapen shadow seemed to gather at the top of the steps, deeper than the general darkness, a void that swallowed the faint candlelight. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was a wrongness, a shape that defied logic, a presence that breathed icy dread into the air. My uncle, despite his earlier scare, somehow managed to slam the attic door shut, shoving a heavy chest in front of it. The thudding stopped. The cold faded slightly. The candle steadied. Thomas passed out. He woke up the next morning, confused, and denied ever seeing or hearing anything. He didn't remember the fear, the whispering, the symbols. My grandparents tried to get him help, but nothing worked. The doctors said it was childhood trauma. They never understood. Thomas is an adult now. He's a software engineer, successful, outwardly normal. But sometimes, when he thinks no one is watching, I still see him. He'll stare at a blank wall, his deep blue eyes unfocused, a faint, knowing look on his face. And sometimes, very rarely, I catch a glimpse of those strange symbols, etched into the dirt of his garden, or doodled on a notepad during a family gathering. He always covers them up quickly, with a strange, almost embarrassed smile. But I know. I still remember the smell from that storm. The metallic earth, the faint rot. It still sometimes clings to him, a ghost of that summer. I never ask him about it. He never talks about it, but the memory, the feeling of that thing in the attic, the shape in the darkness, it followed me home. It follows me to this day. A quiet, chilling reminder that some family secrets aren't just hidden away in photo albums or hushed conversations. Some are waiting in the dark corners of old houses, and they leave a mark that never truly fades, lurking in the eyes of someone you love. I'm a graphic designer now, but for a long time, I was just little Davy, the youngest of 3 boys. Growing up, our house was always full of noise, especially when my older cousins, Mark and Sam, came over. They were twins, always together, always causing trouble. They were a few years older than me, and I looked up to them like heroes. I saw them pull off every prank imaginable, from tying my shoelaces together to convincing me that the moon was made of cheese. They taught me how to climb trees, how to skip stones, and how to scare my little sister. For over a decade, my life was shaped by their mischief and laughter. But here is what keeps me coming back year after year, despite the constant danger and isolation. Our family home was a typical suburban house, with a big backyard and an old oak tree that was perfect for climbing. In the summer, the air buzzed with cicadas and the distant sound of lawn mowers. Inside, it smelled of my mom's cooking and old paperbacks. The twins, Mark and Sam, were inseparable. They looked exactly alike, down to the same scar above their right eyebrows. Even their voices were identical. When they were together, it was like they shared one brain. They'd finish each other's sentences. It was amazing, and sometimes a little creepy. They had their own little world, and I was just a visitor. One summer, they started acting different. They were 15, and I was 12. Usually they'd spend hours playing video games, but this time, they mostly stayed in their room, whispering. When they did come out, their eyes looked a bit too bright, a bit too knowing. They'd stop mid-sentence if I walked in, then exchange silent knowing glances. I tried to join them, but they'd just tell me to go away. I heard my aunt say they were just going through a phase. But it didn't feel like a normal phase. It felt like they were hiding something. There was a new, unsettling stillness about them sometimes. A calm that was not right for 2 boisterous teenage boys. It was like the air around them felt heavy, almost electric. I kept thinking it was just my imagination. But the feeling wouldn't go away. The first truly strange incident happened during a family barbecue. Everyone was outside laughing. Mark and Sam were supposed to be helping my dad, but they disappeared. I went looking for them. I found them in the basement, in the darkest corner, huddled together. They weren't talking. They were just sitting there, staring at an old dusty wooden box that belonged to my grandfather. Its lid was latched, secured with a tarnished old-fashioned lock. But the lock was now open, hanging loose. They were just staring inside it, their faces pale. When they saw me, they slammed the lid shut with a loud thud. "What are you doing?" I asked. Mark just stared at me, his eyes wide. Sam, however, got angry. "Get out, Davy," he hissed, his voice deeper than usual. "This isn't for you." My instincts were screaming that something was wrong. This wasn't just a secret club. They acted like they had seen something truly terrible. They wouldn't touch the box. After that, things escalated fast. Mark and Sam started having nightmares, screaming out in the middle of the night. They'd push away their parents, clutching each other, rigid with terror. They also started talking about A third one. They'd whisper about it. The third one is watching, Sam would mumble. It wants to play, Mark would add. They were convinced the third one was hiding in the shadows. My parents just thought they were being dramatic. Sometimes, one of them would stop in the middle of a sentence, their eyes glazing over, a faint smile playing on their lips, while the other twin would just watch, a cold dread in his gaze. It was as if something else was trying to speak through them. The climax happened late one night. A heat wave had settled over our town. The air was thick and still. I was trying to sleep, but the heat made it impossible. I heard Mark and Sam talking, not whispering, but speaking in low, guttural tones from their bedroom next door. It wasn't English. It sounded ancient, harsh, and utterly wrong. Then, I heard a new voice. It was soft, almost a hiss, but it cut through the night, clear and chilling. It seemed to come from between their voices, like a third speaker. It was voice that didn't sound human, yet it spoke with a horrible intimacy. I crept out of my bed and pressed my ear to their door. The light was on in their room, shining dimly under the crack. Inside, Mark and Sam were sitting on the floor, facing each other. Their eyes were completely black, like pools of ink. No whites, no pupils, just endless black. They were holding hands, their bodies swaying gently. And they were speaking in unison now, the strange, ancient words pouring from their lips. Their faces were stretched into grotesque, unnatural smiles. And then I saw it. Hovering between them, a shadowy form began to coalesce. It was thin, translucent, like smoke, but with definite outlines. It looked like a child, but impossibly tall, its limbs too long, too spindly. Its head was slightly too large, and where a face should be, there was only a swirling vortex of deeper shadow. It was radiating a silent, intense cold that I could feel even through the closed door. Its shadowy hands reached out, not touching them, but hovering inches from their faces. As it moved, a faint, sweet, metallic smell filled the air, like old blood and rust. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to scream, but my throat was frozen. The twins continued to chant, their voices growing louder, their black eyes fixed on the thing. The shadowy figure pulsed, growing denser, darker. It was almost solid now, its form clearer. It opened its mouth, or where its mouth should be, and a silent scream seemed to emanate from it, shaking the very air. It was reaching, hungry, my mind screamed. This was the third one, and it was real, and it was playing with my cousins, and they were letting it. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen. But then, my dad, probably woken by the noise, came out of his room. He saw me at their door, and when he opened it, the light in their room flickered. The shadowy figure vanished instantly. Mark and Sam snapped out of it, their eyes returning to their normal blue, looking confused and exhausted. They had no memory of what happened. My dad thought they were just having a bad dream. Mark and Sam grew up. They went to different colleges, started different lives. They're still close, but that uncanny, twin-like bond they once shared, it's gone. They're just two brothers now, with separate lives. But sometimes, when they're together, if the topic of childhood nightmares comes up, I see it. A flicker of something in their eyes. A shared, silent glance that lasts a second too long. A quiet, knowing fear that still sits deep within them. They don't talk about that summer, or the strange words, or the third one. But I remember. I remember the black eyes, the ancient chants, and the horrifying, shadowy figure. I still wonder what was in that box, what they truly found, and what that third one really was. And sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I hear a faint, almost imperceptible hiss, like someone whispering right into my ear. It reminds me that some family bonds are not just between blood relatives. Some bonds are forged in shadows, and some things, once invited, never truly leave. My name is Elena Petrov. I grew up in a small, tight-knit community where everyone knew everyone and family ties ran deeper than anything. My aunt Anya lived just down the road, and her daughter, my cousin Katya, was my best friend. We were practically sisters, sharing everything from secrets under the covers to dreams of leaving our small town. For as long as I can remember, our lives were intertwined. I knew Katya better than anyone, or so I thought. I've seen the way families protect their own, the secrets they keep buried. But here is what keeps me coming back year after year, despite the constant danger and isolation. Our town was surrounded by dense pine forests, dark and quiet even in summer. The air always had a fresh, earthy smell, mixed with the faint scent of pine needles. Katya's house, like mine, was old, with wooden floors that groaned and settled. We spent countless hours in her bedroom, a cozy space with a window that looked out onto the thick woods. We'd talk for hours, sharing dreams and fears, always with the dark trees as our silent backdrop. The sounds of the forest were a constant companion. The rustling of leaves, the calls of unseen birds, the distant howl of a coyote at night. It was a familiar, comforting soundscape. One summer, when we were both 16, Katya started changing. It wasn't just typical teenage moodiness. She became quieter, distant. She stopped laughing as easily, and her bright, lively eyes seemed to hold a new, unsettling depth, like shadows had begun to gather within them. She'd spend hours staring out her window at the woods, but with a different kind of focus. It wasn't wonder. It was something almost obsessive. She started taking long walks into the forest alone, something she never did before. When she came back, her clothes would be dirty, her hair tangled with twigs, and she'd have an odd, blank expression on her face. When I asked her where she went, she'd just shrug and say, "Nowhere special. Just exploring." But I knew that was a lie. Her favorite clothes, which were always neat and tidy, began to show strange tiny tears and stains that looked like dried mud mixed with something darker, something almost metallic. It felt like she was disappearing into herself or into those woods. An unusual stillness would settle over her after these walks, a quietness that felt heavy and wrong. I tried to rationalize it. Teenagers change. Maybe she was exploring new interests, but deep down, I knew it was something else entirely. It was a cold, creeping sense of dread. The first truly unsettling event happened after one of her solo excursions. She came back later than usual, almost at dusk. Her clothes were torn, her face was streaked with dirt, and her eyes were wide, glittering with an unnatural light. There was a faint, earthy smell clinging to her, like wet soil, and something else. Something I couldn't place. She stumbled into her room and immediately locked the door. I could hear her moving around frantically inside, then a muffled thud. When I knocked, she didn't answer. My aunt tried to, but Katya refused to open the door. We could hear her whispering inside, low and urgent, but to whom? My aunt tried to calm her, but Katya just kept whispering, her voice taking on a strange, rhythmic quality. My instincts were screaming that something was wrong. This wasn't Katya. This was a stranger in her skin. Over the next few days, Katya became even more secretive. She refused to eat meals, claiming she wasn't hungry. She'd spend hours locked in her room, and if you tried to talk to her through the door, you'd hear a low, constant murmur from inside. Sometimes, it sounded like two voices, one being Katya's, the other a softer guttural tone that seemed to echo her words. My aunt and uncle were at their wits' end. They thought she was sick, maybe depressed. They tried to get her to see a doctor, but she'd throw tantrums. She started losing weight, and her skin became pale. But her eyes seemed to shine brighter, deeper, more alive than ever, with that unsettling light. She also developed a strange obsession with shadows. She'd pull the curtains shut even on sunny days. She'd rearrange her furniture to create more dark corners. It was like she was trying to invite the shadows in, or perhaps keep something hidden within them. The climax occurred during a night when the moon was full and unusually bright, casting long, stark shadows. I was staying over at Katya's, despite her strange behavior. My aunt and uncle had gone out. I was trying to read in the living room, but the oppressive silence of the house made me uneasy. Katya was in her room. Then, I heard a sound from her room. It wasn't the usual murmuring. It was a low, rhythmic scratching, like fingernails on wood, or something harder, digging. It was persistent, relentless. My blood ran cold. I crept towards her door, my heart pounding. The scratching grew louder, more frantic. It sounded like something was trying to claw its way out of her room. I pressed my ear to the door. The scratching stopped suddenly. Then I heard Katya's voice, clear as a bell, but not quite her own. It was too deep, too smooth. An echo of her voice, but wrong. She was speaking in a language I didn't know. It sounded ancient, guttural, but also strangely beautiful. And then I heard another sound, something sliding across the floor, something heavy. I heard a soft thud as it hit the wall. The air in the hallway grew cold, not a normal cold, but a chilling, empty cold that seemed to suck the warmth from my bones. I could see a sliver of light under her door. It seemed to pulse faintly. I took a deep breath, my hand trembling, and slowly, carefully, pushed the door open. What I saw will forever be etched in my mind. Katya was standing in the center of her room, her back to me. Her clothes were gone. She was naked, her pale skin glowing faintly in the dim light. Her arms were stretched out, not straight, but bent at odd angles, like a broken doll. And from her back, from her shoulder blades, something was growing. Two dark, leathery wings, impossibly thin and translucent, were slowly unfolding. They were covered in fine, black, almost feathery scales. They seemed to shimmer. The scratching sound had been them unfurling. They flexed slowly. Her head was tilted back, her mouth open in a silent scream or a silent laugh. I couldn't tell which. But the most horrifying thing was her eyes. They weren't looking at the ceiling or at the window. They were fixed directly on the shadow that pooled in the corner of her room, a shadow that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. And from that shadow, two glowing red pinpricks of light, like embers, were staring back at her. A faint, sweet, metallic smell filled the room, the same smell I'd noticed on her clothes earlier. Only now it was overwhelming. It was the scent of old blood and something else, something wild and ancient. She wasn't Katya anymore. She was something else, something born of the forest and the night, something that had finally taken flight. I don't remember screaming. I just remember slamming the door shut and running. I called my parents, my aunt and uncle, everyone. They came home, found Katya asleep in her bed, completely normal. No wings, no strange smells, no dark shadows in the corner. She woke up confused. They blamed my vivid imagination. They said I had a nightmare. Katya is still my cousin. She's a lovely, kind woman now, a teacher. She never mentions that summer or her long walks in the woods. But sometimes, when she thinks no one is looking, I see her. She'll tilt her head back, just slightly, as if listening to something only she can hear. And sometimes, very rarely, I see her brush her fingers over her shoulder blades, a faint gesture. I also notice that she always chooses clothes that cover her back completely. I never ask her about it, but I remember the impossible wings, the black scales, the glowing red eyes in the shadow, and the terrifying knowledge that my cousin was not just my cousin that night. Something had joined her or taken her place. The memory follows me, a constant whisper in the back of my mind. It reminds me that some family secrets are not just hidden. Some are still living, growing, and waiting to unfurl their terrible beauty in the dark. I come from a large, boisterous family. Every year, we'd gather at my great-aunt's sprawling ancient house for Christmas. It was a place of warmth, laughter, and endless food. My cousin, Leo, was always the quiet one, a year older than me, with a love for old books and forgotten stories. He was often lost in his own world, preferring the dusty attic to the noisy living room. For over 15 years, these family gatherings were a highlight, a time of comfort and tradition. I thought I knew every nook and cranny of that house and every secret of my family. But here is what keeps me coming back year after year despite the constant danger and isolation. Great Aunt Clara's house was a relic, a 2-story Victorian with a turret and more rooms than anyone could count. It stood on a hill overlooking a small sleepy town. In winter, the house was a haven from the biting cold, filled with the scent of pine, gingerbread, and burning logs. The attic, however, was a different world. It was cold, dusty, and smelled of old paper and forgotten things. Dust motes danced in the sparse light. Leo loved it up there. He'd spend hours rummaging through old trunks, reading faded letters. He swore the house talked to him. I just thought he had a good imagination. I'd join him sometimes. One Christmas, when I was 13 and Leo 14, his usual quietness turned into something more profound. He became obsessed with a particular section of the attic, a corner filled with covered furniture and boxes. He'd sit there for hours, just staring at a heavy, dark wooden wardrobe that seemed to melt into the shadows. He started tracing patterns on its dusty surface, patterns that looked eerily similar to the strange symbols Thomas carved in the first story. He wouldn't let anyone near it. He'd get agitated, his eyes flashing with an unfamiliar intensity, if someone so much as looked at it too long. I tried to ask him what was so special about it, but he'd just shake his head, a faraway, almost fearful look in his eyes. "It's listening," he'd whisper, "and it's telling me things." I tried to rationalize it, but the way he said, "telling me things," made a chill run down my spine. The stillness of that corner of the attic, the way light seemed to avoid it, it all felt wrong. It was like the air itself was heavier there, charged with an invisible weight. The first truly unsettling event occurred a few days before Christmas. Leo and I were in the attic. He was, as usual, sitting by the wardrobe, running his fingers over its dark wood. Suddenly he flinched, pulling his hand back, as if burned. "It spoke," he whispered, his face pale. "It told me to find something." I asked him what it said. He just shook his head, looking terrified. "It wasn't words," he said, his voice trembling. "It was a feeling, a memory." My instincts were screaming that something was wrong. This wasn't a game. He was genuinely scared. He started rummaging through boxes near the wardrobe, frantic, muttering to himself. He seemed to be looking for something specific, though he couldn't describe it. He was pulled by an unseen force. Over the next few days, Leo became gaunt. He stopped eating properly, his eyes dark with sleepless nights. He'd sneak up to the attic at all hours, sometimes even in the dead of night, and I'd hear faint thuds and scrapes coming from above. When I asked him what he was doing, he'd just say, "It's closer. I have to find it." The family noticed his behavior. My great-aunt began to look at Leo with a worried frown. She'd mention old family stories about things that clung to the house, but quickly dismissed them. But her eyes, whenever she looked at Leo, held a deep, unshakable dread. Leo also started talking in his sleep, not just muttering, but speaking in a language I didn't recognize. A low, rasping whisper that sometimes sounded like two voices speaking at once. The atmosphere in the attic grew heavy, even when Leo wasn't there. A faint smell, like old dry leaves mixed with something metallic and vaguely sweet, started to hang in the air around the wardrobe. The climax arrived on Christmas Eve. The whole family was gathered downstairs, exchanging gifts. But I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Leo had disappeared again. I knew where he was. I slipped away from the party and crept up the creaking stairs to the attic. The door was ajar. As I pushed it open, a wave of intense cold washed over me. The smell, the metallic sweet old leaf smell, was overpowering now. Leo was standing in front of the dark wooden wardrobe. Its doors, which had always been latched shut, were now wide open, revealing a cavern of impossible darkness within. It wasn't just dark, it was an absolute void. Leo was holding something in his hands, a small, intricately carved wooden box. He was holding it out, almost offering it, towards the wardrobe. And then I saw it. From the utter blackness within the wardrobe, two eyes emerged. They weren't like human eyes. They were long, slender ovals of pure, glowing white, without pupils or irises. They glowed with an ancient, hungry light. And then a hand, long and skeletal, emerged, not quite solid, more like solidified smoke, reaching for the box. Its fingers were impossibly long, ending in sharp black talons. A low, dry whisper, like countless dry leaves rustling in a forgotten wind, filled the attic. It spoke directly into my mind, words of unspeakable age and hunger. It was in Leo's mind too, I could tell. He was swaying, his face slack, his eyes fixed on the glowing white eyes. A strange, ecstatic smile on his face. He was not himself. He was a conduit. As the skeletal hand slowly, agonizingly, closed around the wooden box, I saw a flicker of movement behind the hand, deeper within the wardrobe's void. A shape. It was huge, impossibly large for the small space, made of shadows within shadows, vast and formless, yet undeniably present. It radiated a profound ancient evil that made my blood freeze. The white eyes were now fixed on me, pulling me into its gaze. I felt a cold, sharp tendril of fear pierce my chest. The dry whisper grew louder, filling my head with a chorus of voices. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that whatever was in that wardrobe was waking up, and Leo was helping it. He was giving it the key. I don't know what happened next. I remember a flash of light, a deafening crash as something heavy fell, and then silence. I woke up hours later, downstairs. My family found me unconscious at the bottom of the attic stairs. Leo was also found unconscious, in his bed, the wooden box clutched in his hand. The wardrobe doors were closed, sealed tight. My great-aunt said I must have fainted. Leo, when he woke up, was confused. He didn't remember finding the box. He was back to his quiet, bookish self. Leo still visits Great-Aunt Clara's house. He still loves old books. But he never goes to the attic anymore. He never talks about the wardrobe. But sometimes, when he thinks no one is looking, I see him glance up at the attic door. A flicker of something haunted in his usually calm eyes. And sometimes, very rarely, I catch a glimpse of the wooden box. He keeps it hidden, never showing it to anyone. But sometimes I see it on his bookshelf. But I know what it truly holds. I remember the glowing white eyes, the skeletal hand, the vast shadow, and the ancient whisper that still echoes in my dreams. It follows me, a constant reminder that some family treasures are not meant to be found. Some are better left buried, locked away in the dark, waiting for someone to open the door. My name is Sofia Ramirez. My family is huge, sprawling across generations, and we all grew up together in the same small town. My cousin, Anna, was the youngest of my aunt's children, a few years younger than me. She was a bright, joyful little girl, always full of laughter and a spark for life. I always felt a protective older sister bond with her. We spent countless weekends playing hide and seek in the dusty cornfields that surrounded our homes, or building elaborate forts in the woods nearby. I've seen the pure innocence of childhood, the way families protect their most vulnerable. But here is what keeps me coming back year after year, despite the constant danger and isolation. Our town was surrounded by endless fields of corn, stretching out like green oceans in the summer. The air always smelled of dry earth and growing plants. Anna's house was a small, cozy bungalow, but its backyard bordered directly onto the dense woods, a place where sunlight struggled to reach the forest floor. We often played in those woods, pretending to be explorers, building secret pathways and hideouts. The sounds of the woods were familiar: chirping crickets, rustling leaves, the occasional hoot of an owl at dusk. It was our playground, our adventure zone. One spring, when Anna was 6 and I was 9, she started talking about an invisible friend. This wasn't unusual for a child. Many kids have imaginary friends. But Anna's friend, whom she called Lily, felt different. Lily wasn't just a playmate. She was a constant presence. Anna would set an extra plate for Lily at dinner, insist on holding her hand when we walked, and talk to her in hushed whispers. My aunt and uncle found it endearing, a phase she'd grow out of. But I noticed a shift. Anna, usually so open and cheerful, started to become secretive about Lily. She'd stop talking if an adult walked into the room, and give me a strange, knowing look that told me not to mention Lily. She started spending more and more time alone in the woods, supposedly playing with Lily. When she came back, her clothes would be strangely clean, even after hours in the dirt, but her eyes, Her bright, innocent eyes sometimes held a glint that wasn't quite hers, a cold, ancient spark that made me shiver. An unusual stillness would fall over her when she spoke about Lily, a quiet intensity that felt too old for a 6-year-old. I tried to make sense of it, thinking maybe she was just lonely, making up stories, but a growing sense of unease settled in my stomach. The first truly unsettling event happened when Anna had been playing in the woods all afternoon. It was getting dark, and my aunt called her in. Anna came back, but she wasn't alone. I saw her walking, her small hand held out, as if holding someone else's. She was talking to Lily, laughing softly. But then, as she crossed the threshold into the house, her body stiffened. She dropped the invisible hand. Her eyes widened, darting back to the edge of the woods. Look of pure terror, stark and raw, spread across her face. "Lily can't come inside," she whispered, her voice barely audible, shaking. "She doesn't like the light." She started to cry, a deep, heartbroken sob. My aunt tried to comfort her, but Anna wouldn't stop staring at the woods, her small body trembling. My instincts were screaming that something was wrong. This wasn't a game. Lily wasn't imaginary. Over the next few weeks, Anna's behavior grew stranger. She stopped eating much, claiming, "Lily doesn't need to eat, so I don't either." She became withdrawn, often found sitting by the window, staring out at the woods, sometimes for hours. She'd whisper things, not to Lily anymore, but about Lily. "Lily says the trees are hungry. Lily says the shadows have eyes." My aunt and uncle grew more concerned. They took her to a doctor who said she was just highly imaginative. But I saw the dark circles under her eyes, the unnatural paleness of her skin. And I saw the way she'd flinch whenever a shadow fell across her, as if it contained something dangerous. She also developed a strange habit. She'd collect small, smooth, dark stones from the woods and arrange them in specific patterns on her windowsill. They weren't just random piles. They looked like symbols, ancient and unsettling. A faint, earthy smell, like damp soil mixed with something sickly sweet, started to cling to her, especially after her trips to the woods. It was a smell that reminded me of decaying flowers and something else, something cold and dead. The climax happened during a sweltering summer night. A storm was brewing, but the air was still and heavy. The kind of night where the world feels like it's holding its breath. I was trying to sleep, but the heat and a growing sense of dread kept me awake. I heard a soft tapping on Anna's window, which faced the woods. Tap, tap, tap. It was rhythmic, persistent. My blood ran cold. I knew my aunt and uncle were heavy sleepers, and Anna's room was on the other side of the house from theirs. I slowly, quietly, crept out of my bed and made my way down the hallway towards Anna's room. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, almost like a desperate scratching. As I neared her door, I heard Anna's voice, small and fearful. "Lily, you can't come in," she pleaded. "It's not allowed." Then, a new sound, a low, dry scrape, like heavy fingernails dragging across glass, followed by a faint, wet sucking sound. It was coming from outside her window. A wave of intense, unearthly cold washed over me, a cold that felt like it had seeped from the deepest part of the earth. The air in the hallway grew thick, heavy, with the sickly sweet, decaying floral scent I'd noticed on Anna. I peered through the crack in her door, my heart hammering against my ribs. Anna was sitting on her bed, huddled in a ball, facing the window. The curtains were drawn, but a faint, pulsing light was coming from outside. Dim, glowing sickly green. And then I saw it. Two long, impossibly thin, shadowy fingers, ending in sharp, black talons, were slowly sliding between the gap in the curtains, pushing them apart. They were translucent, like smoke, but solid enough to move the fabric. As they parted the curtains, I saw two eyes, large and round, glowing with that same sickly green light. They were too big for a child, too knowing, too ancient. They stared directly into Anna's room, not at Anna, but as if searching for something or someone. And then a mouth opened, a wide, gaping hole that stretched unnaturally. It was filled with needle-sharp teeth, too many teeth, all pointing inward. A silent, piercing shriek seemed to emanate from it, shaking the very air, making my teeth ache. I could see the reflection of its huge, distorted face in Anna's wide, tear-filled eyes. It was tall, impossibly thin, its shadowy body pressed against the window. It was the Lily Anna had been playing with, but it was no child's imaginary friend. It was a predator, a thing of hunger and shadow, its ancient eyes fixed on Anna. It was reaching for her slowly, deliberately, its skeletal hand phasing through the glass as if it were air. It wanted to pull her out into the waiting darkness of the woods. I don't know what I did. Maybe I screamed. Maybe I just collapsed. I remember my dad bursting into the room, having heard my cry, or maybe the unearthly shriek. As soon as he turned on the light, the shadowy figure at the window vanished, leaving only a faint, lingering scent of decay and a strange, viscous slime on the window pane. Anna was sobbing, clutching her teddy bear, completely disoriented. She didn't remember any of it, just a vague, terrifying dream of being pulled into the dark. My parents dismissed it as a bad dream and my overactive imagination. Anna grew up, a bright and happy woman. She's a mother now, with children of her own. She still has a special connection with the woods, a quiet respect for its depths. But she never lets her own children play too close to the tree line after dusk. And sometimes, when she thinks no one is looking, I see her glance at the woods, a flicker of something haunted in her usually vibrant eyes. And sometimes, very rarely, she'll find a small, dark, smooth stone on her windowsill, even if she swears she hasn't put one there. She always throws them back into the woods quickly, with a strange urgency. She never talks about Lily, or the green eyes, or the silent scream. But I remember the shadowy fingers, the needle teeth, and the terrifying knowledge that some childhood friends are not just imaginary. Some are real, ancient, and hungry, lurking in the shadows of the woods, waiting for an invitation to play. My name is Ethan Hayes. My cousin Chloe and I were born just a few months apart, practically inseparable from birth. We grew up in a small, isolated town, surrounded by endless tracts of farmland and dense, silent forests. Our families lived next door to each other, so every day was an adventure, whether we were building tree houses or exploring forgotten paths. I've always been a practical, grounded person, not one to believe in ghosts or tall tales. I've seen the way families protect their own, the small habits they pick up from living so close. But here is what keeps me coming back year after year, despite the constant danger and isolation. Our homes were old, sprawling farmhouses, each with a history that predated our grandparents. The air always smelled of damp earth and wood smoke, especially in the cooler months. Chloe and I spent our winters exploring the dusty corners of her grandmother's attic. a place filled with forgotten relics and strange musty smells. The attic was dark, lit by a single bare bulb, casting long, eerie shadows. Old furniture draped in white sheets looked like silent ghosts. It was our favorite spot to tell scary stories, mostly because the atmosphere did half the work for us. We loved to spook each other, laughing nervously afterwards. One dreary autumn, when we were both 14, Chloe found something in the attic. It was an old leather-bound journal, its pages brittle and yellowed. It was tucked away in a trunk, filled with her great-grandmother's old clothes. The journal was written in a flowing, old-fashioned script, and Chloe, being the more studious one, started trying to decipher it. She became obsessed, spending every free moment in the attic, hunched over the book, her brow furrowed in concentration. She started telling me bits and pieces, strange tales of rituals, spirits, and warnings that had been passed down through their side of the family. My great-grandmother, apparently, was deeply involved in some old local folklore, something about spirits of the land and old pacts. Chloe's excitement was infectious at first, but it quickly turned unsettling. She'd read passages aloud in a strange, monotone voice, her eyes unfocused. An unusual stillness would fall over her, a quiet focus that made her seem distant, almost possessed. I tried to make light of it, saying it was just an old story, but a knot of dread began to tighten in my stomach. Her fascination felt too real, too deep. The attic, which used to be a place of fun, now felt heavy, its shadows watching. The first truly unsettling event happened one evening after Chloe had spent the entire day with the journal. She came down from the attic, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mix of terror and fascination. She was clutching the journal to her chest. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I think it wants me to do something." I asked her what she meant. She just shook her head, unable to speak, her body trembling. "It showed me," she finally managed, "a dream of the woods." My instincts were screaming that something was wrong. This wasn't just a story anymore. The journal was affecting her in a deep, disturbing way. She wouldn't let go of the book, even when she slept. She kept it under her pillow. Over the next few weeks, Chloe became a ghost of her former self. She rarely ate. Her skin became almost translucent, and she was constantly tired, yet unable to sleep soundly. She'd wander the house in the middle of the night, sometimes finding herself outside, standing barefoot in the cold autumn grass, staring at the dark woods. When her parents asked her about it, she'd just say she was following a feeling. She started having vivid nightmares, screaming out in the dead of night, often about the whispers from the trees or the calling of the earth. My aunt and uncle grew frantic. They took her to several doctors, but no one could find anything physically wrong with her. They suggested stress, or possibly a mental breakdown. But I saw the way her eyes would sometimes glaze over, a strange ancient light flickering within them, as if another presence was looking through her. She also developed a strange smell, a mix of damp earth, decaying leaves, and something else, something metallic and sharp, like fresh blood. It was faint at first, but it grew stronger, especially when she was near the journal. The climax arrived on a night of a new moon, when the sky was completely dark, and the woods outside our homes were swallowed by an impenetrable blackness. Chloe had been especially agitated that day. constantly muttering passages from the journal, her eyes darting around as if something invisible was in the room with her. That evening, as our families gathered for a quiet dinner, she suddenly stood up from the table, her fork clattering to her plate. Her eyes were completely black, like pools of ink, just like I heard from David's story about his cousins, Mark and Sam. But unlike their story, no whites, no pupils, just pure, terrifying black. A cold, unnatural gust of wind swept through the dining room, even though all the windows were closed. The candles on the table flickered wildly, threatening to go out. Chloe began to speak, but it wasn't a voice. It was a low, guttural rasp, a chorus of voices speaking in unison, ancient and terrifying. It spoke in the language of the journal, words that felt like they were tearing at the fabric of reality. My great-aunt gasped, clutching her chest, her face ashen. She recognized the language from old family legends. As Chloe chanted, a strange light began to emanate from her body. A faint, pulsing green glow, similar to the light outside Anna's window in the previous story. It shimmered around her, bathing the room in an eerie, otherworldly hue. And then, from the corners of the dining room, the shadows began to deepen, to gather. They weren't just normal shadows. They were moving, coalescing, forming indistinct shapes that seemed to writhe and pulse with a silent, malevolent life. The air grew impossibly cold, the metallic, blood-like smell overwhelming. Then, from the darkest corner of the room, a form began to emerge. It was tall, impossibly thin, its limbs too long, too spindly. Its head was too large, misshapen, and where a face should be, there was only a swirling vortex of deeper shadow, a void that seemed to suck in all light. Its form was like solidified darkness, yet it seemed to ripple, to shift, as if made of fluid. It had long, razor-sharp claws on its hands, scraping against the wooden floor, with a sound that grated on my nerves, even though it didn't seem to be touching the floor. It radiated a profound ancient evil that made my blood freeze. It was the spirits of the land from the journal, and it was here. It slowly raised one of its long, clawed hands towards Chloe, its black, shadowy fingers trembling. It was pulling at her, demanding something. And Chloe, her black eyes fixed on the thing, began to walk towards it, slowly, robotically, offering herself up. The thing was trying to pull her into the shadows, into its own terrifying dimension. The green light around Chloe pulsed faster, brighter, and the shadowy entity seemed to drink it in, growing denser, more defined, its form solidifying. A silent, piercing scream filled my mind, not from the entity, but from the realization that Chloe was lost. I don't remember how it stopped. My great-aunt somehow found her strength. She grabbed a crucifix from the mantelpiece and threw it at the chanting Chloe. The moment the crucifix hit her, the green light around Chloe vanished. The shadowy entity recoiled, hissed silently, and then dissolved back into the shadows, leaving behind only the lingering smell of damp earth and blood. Chloe collapsed, her eyes returning to normal, looking bewildered and exhausted. She had no memory of the chanting, the black eyes, or the shadowy figure. My great-aunt, a woman who rarely spoke of such things, later whispered to my parents that Chloe had accidentally opened a door with the journal, and something ancient and hungry had tried to come through. Chloe is an adult now. She's a successful journalist living far away from our small town. She never talks about that autumn, or the old journal, or her great-grandmother's strange folklore. But sometimes, when she thinks no one is looking, I see her. She'll glance at shadows, a flicker of something haunted in her usually analytical eyes. And sometimes, very rarely, she'll trace patterns on a dusty surface, patterns that look eerily similar to the symbols she used to make from the journal. She never touches old books now, especially not leather-bound ones. I never ask her about it, but I remember the black eyes, the ancient chants, the green glow, and the terrifying knowledge that some family histories are not just stories. Some are warnings, and some doors, once opened, leave a crack for things to slip through, forever shadowing the lives of those left behind. I come from a family that loved to travel, especially to remote places. Every summer, my aunt, uncle, and their daughter, my cousin Maya, would join us on these trips. Maya was my closest confidant, always daring, always seeking out the thrill of the unknown. We explored ancient ruins, trekked through dense jungles, and scaled daunting mountain peaks. For over a decade, our lives were a constant adventure, a shared quest for discovery. I've seen the wonders of the world, the beauty and terror of nature, and the way families bond through shared experiences. But here is what keeps me coming back year after year, despite the constant danger and isolation. Our most memorable trips were to archaeological sites, places forgotten by time, filled with crumbling stones and whispers of ancient civilizations. The air in these places often smelled of dust, dry earth, and the faint, sweet scent of decaying plants. One particular summer, when I was 16 and Maya was 15, we were in a remote part of South America, exploring an isolated set of ruins deep within a dense jungle. The jungle was a symphony of sounds, buzzing insects, the cries of exotic birds. It was hot, humid, and alive. Maya, with her fearless spirit, was always drawn to the untouched, the hidden. While the adults were busy mapping, Maya and I would sneak off to explore. It was during one of these expeditions that she found something. It was a small, intricately carved stone tablet, covered in symbols that no one recognized. It was buried deep within a forgotten shrine. Maya immediately became obsessed with it. She spent hours tracing the symbols, trying to make sense of them. Her usual adventurous spirit gave way to a quiet, intense focus. She stopped wanting to explore. She just wanted to study the tablet. She'd rub the stone, muttering under her breath, a faraway look in her eyes. An unusual stillness would fall over her when she was with the tablet, a quiet intensity that felt almost sacred. I tried to make sense of it, but a cold, creeping sense of dread began to worm its way into my thoughts. The tablet seemed to pull at her, to absorb her attention completely. It felt wrong. The first truly unsettling event happened a few days later. Maya was sitting alone in our tent, the tablet clutched in her hands, her eyes fixed on its surface. Suddenly, she cried out, dropping the tablet as if it had burned her. Her face was ashen, her body trembling. "It spoke to me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It showed me a vision." I asked her what it said. She just shook her head, looking terrified. "It wasn't words," she said, her voice shaking. "It was images of a darkness and of an opening." My instincts were screaming that something was wrong. This wasn't just a vision. The tablet was clearly communicating with her in an abnormal way. She wouldn't let anyone touch the tablet after that, guarding it fiercely, even sleeping with it under her pillow. Over the next few days, Maya became increasingly withdrawn and secretive. She stopped eating much, her skin became pale, and she was constantly agitated, pacing, muttering to herself. She'd stare blankly into the jungle, her eyes wide, as if seeing things no one else could. She started talking about the ancient ones and the deep sleep. When her parents tried to talk to her, she'd become defensive, even hostile, claiming they didn't understand the truth. She also started having vivid nightmares, screaming out, often about the whispers from below or the hungry earth. My aunt and uncle thought she was succumbing to some strange jungle fever. But I saw the way her eyes would sometimes glow with a faint, unearthly light, a deep, knowing spark that felt utterly foreign. She also developed a strange smell, a mix of damp earth, stale water, and something metallic and sharp, like ancient rust. The climax arrived on a night when the jungle was alive with oppressive humidity. The moon was obscured by thick clouds, plunging the camp into near total darkness, broken only by our flickering lanterns. Maya had been particularly agitated that day, constantly clutching the tablet. That evening, as our families gathered for a quiet dinner, she suddenly stood up, her plate clattering. Her eyes were completely black, like endless voids. A cold, unnatural gust of wind, smelling strongly of damp earth and ancient rust, swept through the tent. The lanterns flickered wildly. Maya began to speak, but it wasn't her voice. It was a low, guttural growl, a chorus of voices speaking in unison, ancient and terrifying. It spoke in the language of the tablet, words that felt like they were ripping holes in the fabric of the air itself. My aunt gasped, clutching her chest, her face ashen. She recognized the symbols on the tablet from archaeological texts. As Maya chanted, a strange light began to emanate from her body, a faint, pulsing blue glow. It shimmered around her, and then the ground beneath us began to tremble. Cracks began to appear in the earth outside the tent, small at first, then widening, revealing a black abyss. The air grew impossibly cold, the metallic, rust-like smell overwhelming. Then, from the center of the main tent, the earth began to rupture. A gaping maw filled with jagged, earth-encrusted teeth slowly opened from the ground up, exhaling a foul, ancient stench. And from this abyss, a form began to emerge. It was massive, made of soil and roots and ancient stone, vaguely humanoid, but twisted, grotesque. Its eyes were huge, glowing red orbs like molten lava, staring with an ancient, malevolent hunger. It radiated a profound, primordial evil that made my very soul scream. It was the Ancient Ones, and it was waking up. It slowly raised one of its immense, earth-encrusted hands towards Maya, its monstrous fingers trembling. It was pulling at her. And Maya, her black swirling eyes fixed on the thing, began to walk towards it, slowly, robotically, the blue light around her pulsing faster, brighter. She was offering herself up, a conduit for its horrifying return. The ground continued to split, the creature continued to rise, its immense, shadowy form filling the tent. Its huge, jagged mouth opened wider, emitting a silent, piercing roar that vibrated through my bones. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that whatever was coming was not just going to destroy our expedition. It was going to swallow the world. I don't know what happened next. I remember a blinding flash of blue light, a deafening crack that felt like the world was tearing apart, and then a profound silence. I woke up hours later, outside the tent, covered in dirt. My family was there, shaken but unharmed. Maya was also found unconscious, clutching the stone tablet, her blue light gone. The gaping maw in the earth was gone too, replaced by cracked, scorched ground. The tablet was broken. My aunt and uncle, baffled, packed up camp immediately. They dismissed it as a massive earthquake and Maya's delirium. Maya is an adult now. She's an anthropologist, still drawn to ancient cultures, but she never travels to remote archaeological sites anymore. She never talks about that summer, or the stone tablet, or the ancient ones. But sometimes, when she thinks no one is looking, I see her. She'll glance at the ground, a flicker of something haunted in her usually vibrant eyes. And sometimes, very rarely, she'll trace patterns on the earth, patterns that look eerily similar to the symbols on the broken tablet. She never touches ancient artifacts now. I never ask her about it, but I remember the black swirling eyes, the guttural growl, the blue glow, and the terrifying knowledge that some ancient artifacts are not just relics. Some are keys, and some doors, once opened, unleash a hunger that can never truly be sated, forever haunting those who glimpse the darkness beyond. My name is Liam O'Connell. My family owns an old fishing lodge nestled deep in the wilderness, on the shores of a vast ancient lake. Every summer, my cousins would come to stay, filling the quiet lodge with laughter and youthful energy. My cousin, Nora, was always the most adventurous, drawn to the deep, dark waters of the lake like a moth to a flame. We spent our childhoods on those shores, fishing, swimming, and exploring the dense forests that hug the water's edge. For over 20 years, I've known that lake, its moods, its secrets. I've seen the way families build lives around nature and the respect it demands. But here is what keeps me coming back year after year, despite the constant danger and isolation. The lodge was a haven, a rustic building of dark wood and stone, always smelling of pine and damp earth. But the lake was something else. It was enormous, its waters so deep. They were almost black, reflecting the endless pines that lined its shores. It was usually still, silent, giving off a sense of immense quiet power. The sounds of the wilderness were a constant. The gentle lapping of waves, the calls of loons echoing across the water, the rustling of unseen animals in the woods. It felt ancient, timeless. One summer, when Nora was 15 and I was 14, she started spending more and more time by the lake, alone. Not fishing, not swimming, just sitting on the old dock, staring out at the dark waters for hours. She'd come back to the lodge with her clothes damp, even if she hadn't been swimming, and a strange, distant look in her eyes. She started talking about a song she heard in the water, a low humming melody that only she could hear. My family thought she was just being poetic, but I noticed a shift. Her usual vibrant energy gave way to a quiet, almost melancholic obsession. She'd hum the melody she heard, a strange, beautiful tune that made my skin prickle with goosebumps. It was haunting, ancient, and utterly captivating. An unusual stillness would fall over her when she hummed it, a quiet intensity that felt too old for a teenager. I tried to make sense of it, but a cold, creeping sense of dread began to fill me. The lake, which had always felt like a friend, now seemed to watch us, silent and knowing. The first truly unsettling event happened one evening after Nora had spent the entire day by the lake. She came back to the lodge, her clothes soaked through, even though there had been no rain. Her hair was tangled with tiny dark green weeds, and her eyes were wide, glittering with an unnatural light, like the reflection of the deep lake itself. She was shivering, but not from cold. "It called to me," she whispered, her voice barely audible, shaking. "It wants me to join it." I asked her what she meant. She just shook her head, unable to speak, her body trembling uncontrollably. "The song. It's a promise," she finally managed, her voice barely a breath. My instincts were screaming that something was wrong. This wasn't a metaphor. The lake was truly calling to her. She wouldn't go near the main dock after that, but she started taking a small old rowboat out into the deepest part of the lake, alone, at odd hours, sometimes even in the dead of night. Over the next few days, Nora became gaunt. She stopped eating properly. Her skin became pale, and she was constantly tired, yet unable to sleep soundly. She'd wander the lodge in the middle of the night, sometimes finding herself by the back door, staring out at the lake. When her parents asked her about it, she'd just say she was listening to the song. She started having vivid nightmares, screaming out in the dead of night, often about the cold embrace of the depths, or the hungry whispers from below. My aunt and uncle grew frantic. They took her to several doctors, but no one could find anything physically wrong. They suggested stress, but I saw the way her eyes would sometimes glow with a faint, unearthly blue light, a deep, knowing spark that felt utterly foreign. She also developed a strange smell, a mix of damp earth, stale water, and something else, something briny and ancient, like deep sea decay. The climax arrived on a night when a thick fog had rolled in, blanketing the entire lake. The air was heavy, damp, and eerily silent. The moon was a faint, hazy glow in the sky. Nora had been particularly agitated that day, constantly humming the ancient melody. That evening, as her families gathered for a quiet dinner, she suddenly stood up from the table. Her eyes were completely black, like deep, abyssal pools. A cold, unnatural gust of wind, smelling strongly of damp earth and ancient brine, swept through the dining room. The oil lanterns flickered wildly. Nora began to speak, but it wasn't her voice. It was a low, guttural gurgle, a chorus of voices speaking in unison, ancient and terrifying. It spoke in a language that sounded like a distorted song, a melody of despair and endless cold. My aunt gasped, clutching her chest, her face ashen. She recognized fragments of old local legends about the sleeper in the lake. As Nora chanted, a strange light began to emanate from her body, a faint, pulsing blue glow. It shimmered around her, and then, from the windows facing the lake, the fog began to press inward, not just swirling, but forming shapes against the glass. Vague, colossal forms, undulating slowly, the air grew impossibly cold, the briny decaying smell overwhelming. The wooden floor beneath us began to groan under an immense unseen pressure. Then the heavy wooden back door, which led directly to the lake, slowly, agonizingly, began to creak open. As if pulled by an invisible hand, a thick, inky blackness, deeper than the fog, streamed into the lodge, carrying with it an impossible cold. And from this darkness, a form began to emerge. It was massive, vaguely serpentine, but with countless, shimmering, translucent tentacles that stretched and writhed. Its skin, if you could call it that, was black and slimy, covered in glowing bioluminescent patterns that pulsed with a hypnotic, ancient rhythm. Its eyes, if they were eyes, were vast, glowing yellow orbs like distant suns in an endless abyss, staring with an ancient primordial hunger. It radiated a profound cosmic evil that made my very soul scream. It was the sleeper in the lake, and it was waking up. It slowly raised one of its immense, shimmering tentacles towards Nora, its suckers pulsating. It was pulling at her. And Nora, her black swirling eyes fixed on the thing, began to walk towards it, slowly, robotically, the blue light around her pulsing faster, brighter. She was offering herself up. The tentacles reached further, wrapping around the doorframe, pulling the lodge itself towards the lake. Its huge, gaping maw, a dark void filled with rows of razor-sharp, translucent teeth, slowly opened, emitting a silent, piercing roar that vibrated through my bones. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that whatever was coming was not just going to claim Nora. It was going to swallow the entire lodge and drag us all into its lightless, eternal sleep. I don't know what happened next. I remember a blinding flash of blue light, a deafening crack that felt like the world was tearing apart, and then a profound silence. I woke up hours later, on the shore, covered in mud and freezing cold. My family was there, shaken but unharmed. Nora was also found unconscious, floating in a small overturned rowboat. The ancient melody still faintly on her lips, her blue light gone. The fog had lifted. The lake was still and calm, but the back door of the lodge was ripped clean off its hinges, and deep gouges scarred the wooden floor. My aunt and uncle, baffled, closed the lodge for the season. They dismissed it as a massive storm and Nora's hallucinations. Nora is an adult now. She's a marine biologist, still drawn to the depths, but she never goes near that particular lake. She never talks about that summer, or the song, or the sleeper in the lake. But sometimes, when she thinks no one is looking, I see her. She'll glance at large bodies of water, a flicker of something haunted in her usually scientific eyes. And sometimes, very rarely, she'll hum that ancient melody, a soft haunting tune that makes my skin prickle, as if she's trying to remember something. She never goes swimming in deep lakes now, preferring the ocean. I never ask her about it, but I remember the black, swirling eyes, the guttural gurgle, the blue glow, and the terrifying knowledge that some bodies of water hold secrets far deeper than we can imagine. Some ancient things sleep beneath the surface, and sometimes they sing, waiting for someone to listen, forever shadowing the lives of those who hear their call. I grew up in a very religious, very strict family. My cousin Sarah was just like me, raised with a strong sense of right and wrong and a deep belief in God. We were inseparable, two peas in a pod, always trying to be good, to do what was expected of us. Our lives revolved around church, Bible study, and family gatherings where morality was always a central theme. I've seen the comfort faith can bring, the way it shapes lives and provides a moral compass. But here is what keeps me coming back year after year despite the constant danger and isolation. Our homes were simple, clean, and filled with biblical verses on the walls. The air always smelled of polished wood, beeswax, and occasionally incense from Sunday services. Sarah's house had a small private chapel room, a quiet space where she loved to pray and read her Bible. It was a peaceful room, filled with soft light from a stained glass window. The sounds were always muted there, a sense of calm and quiet reverence. It was our sanctuary, our safe space to discuss our doubts and hopes and reaffirm our faith. One summer, when we were both 16, Sarah started spending more and more time in the chapel room, but not in the way she used to. She became withdrawn, her usual bright piety replaced by a quiet, unsettling intensity. She stopped praying aloud, instead just sitting in the dim light, staring at the crucifix on the wall. She started drawing strange symbols on scraps of paper, hiding them under her Bible. They weren't holy symbols. They were jagged, angry marks that made my stomach clench. She'd get agitated if I tried to look at them. She'd also started speaking in strange riddles, talking about the other path and the hidden truth. My aunt and uncle thought she was going through a spiritual crisis, questioning her faith. They encouraged her to pray more, to read her Bible. But I noticed a shift. Her eyes, usually so full of gentle kindness, sometimes held a hard, almost defiant glint. A cold spark of something rebellious, something old. An unusual stillness would fall over her when she spoke about these hidden truths. A quiet intensity that felt almost fanatical, almost dangerous. I tried to make sense of it, telling myself she was just exploring her spirituality, finding her own way. But a cold, creeping sense of dread began to fill me. The chapel room, which used to be a place of peace, now felt heavy, its shadows watching, almost expectant. The first truly unsettling event happened one evening. Sarah had been in the chapel room all day. When she finally came out, her face was pale, her clothes disheveled, and her eyes were wide, glittering with an unnatural light that seemed to burn with a cold fire. She was clutching a small, tarnished silver locket that I'd never seen before, and that she said belonged to her great-grandmother. "It spoke to me," she whispered, her voice barely audible, shaking. "It showed me the real truth." I asked her what she meant, what it said. She just shook her head, looking terrified, yet exhilarated. "It wasn't words," she said, her voice trembling. "It was a vision of what's truly hidden behind the veil." My instincts were screaming that something was wrong. This wasn't a spiritual awakening. The locket was showing her something truly terrible, and it was twisting her. She wouldn't let go of the locket, wearing it constantly, even when she slept. Over the next few days, Sarah became gaunt. She stopped eating properly. Her skin became pale, almost translucent, and she was constantly tired, yet unable to sleep soundly. She'd wander the house in the middle of the night, sometimes finding herself in the chapel room, staring at the crucifix, not with reverence, but with a strange, cold contempt. When her parents asked her about it, she'd just say she was seeking knowledge. She started having vivid nightmares, screaming out in the dead of night, often about the shadows that walk among us, or the false light. My aunt and uncle grew frantic. They took her to several pastors and religious counselors, but no one could break through her strange, new conviction. They suggested she was being tempted by evil, or that she was undergoing a severe spiritual trial. But I saw the way her eyes would sometimes glow with a faint, unearthly red light, a deep, knowing spark that felt utterly demonic, like the fires of hell itself. She also developed a strange smell, a mix of old iron, something acrid like sulfur, and something sickly sweet, like decaying meat. It was faint at first, but it grew stronger, especially when she was in the chapel room with the locket. The climax arrived on a Sunday morning during our usual church service. The air was filled with the familiar hymns, the scent of frankincense, and the soft glow of stained glass windows. But I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Sarah had been particularly agitated that morning, constantly muttering phrases from some hidden text she'd written, her eyes darting around as if something invisible was in the room with her, mocking the service. She was clutching the locket, her knuckles white. During the sermon, as the pastor spoke of God's love and light, Sarah suddenly stood up from her pew, her eyes completely black, like endless, swirling pits of obsidian, no whites, no pupils, just pure, terrifying black, reflecting a cold, dead universe. A cold, unnatural gust of wind, smelling strongly of sulfur and decay in flesh, swept through the church, making the candles flicker wildly and the cross on the altar tremble. The air grew thick, heavy, with an oppressive silence that swallowed the pastor's words. Sarah began to speak, but it wasn't her voice. It was a low, guttural growl, a chorus of voices speaking in unison, ancient and terrifying, like the whispers of demons from the darkest pits. It spoke in a language that felt like pure blasphemy, words that seemed to tear at the holy ground itself. The entire congregation gasped, recoiling in horror. As Sarah chanted, a strange light began to emanate from her body, a faint, pulsing red glow. It shimmered around her, bathing the front of the church in an eerie, otherworldly hue, like the embers of a dying fire. And then, from the stained glass window behind the altar, the images began to melt and distort, the saints and angels twisting into grotesque, demonic forms. The glass itself seemed to ripple, like water, reflecting a world not of God, but of pure, unimaginable evil. The air grew impossibly cold, the acrid, sulphurous smell overwhelming, burning my nostrils. The wooden pews beneath us began to groan under an immense, unseen pressure, as if the very church was being ripped apart. Then, from the distorted stained glass window, a form began to emerge. It was vast, shadowy, its true shape impossible to discern, but it seemed to coalesce into a towering, impossibly thin figure. Its head was too large, misshapen, crowned with horns of solidified shadow. And where a face should be, there was only a swirling vortex of deeper darkness. A void that seemed to suck in all light. Its limbs were too long, too spindly, ending in razor-sharp talons that dripped with an invisible, corrosive darkness. It radiated a profound, ancient evil that made my very soul scream, a hatred so pure it felt like a physical blow. It was the hidden truth, and it was here. It slowly raised one of its immense, shadowy hands towards Sarah, its black, demonic fingers trembling. It was pulling at her, demanding something. And Sarah, her black, swirling eyes fixed on the thing, began to walk towards it, slowly, robotically. The red light around her pulsing faster, brighter. She was offering herself up, a willing sacrifice to the darkness. The shadows from the window stretched, wrapping around the altar, pulling the church itself towards the abyss. Its huge, gaping maw, a dark void filled with rows of razor-sharp, obsidian teeth, slowly opened, emitting a silent, piercing roar that vibrated through my bones, promising an endless, agonizing damnation. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that whatever was coming was not just going to claim Sarah. It was going to swallow the entire church and drag us all into its lightless, eternal torment. I don't know what happened next. I remember a blinding flash of red light, a deafening crack that felt like the world was tearing apart, and then a profound silence. I woke up hours later, outside the church, covered in dust and cold sweat. My family was there, shaken but unharmed. Sarah was also found unconscious, collapsed in front of the altar, the tarnished silver locket clutched in her hand, her red light gone. The stained glass window was intact, the church peaceful, but a faint, acrid smell lingered in the air, and deep claw marks marred the altar. My aunt and uncle, baffled and terrified, refused to speak of the incident. They dismissed it as a mass hallucination, a collective demonic attack, and Sarah's spiritual exhaustion. Sarah is an adult now. She's a devout nun, dedicating her life to God. She never talks about that summer or the locket or the hidden truth. But sometimes, when she thinks no one is looking, I see her. She'll glance at shadows, a flicker of something haunted in her usually serene eyes. And sometimes, very rarely, she'll trace strange symbols on the ground with her finger, quickly erasing them, as if she's trying to remember something or forget it. She never wears jewelry now, especially not lockets. I never ask her about it, but I remember the black swirling eyes, the guttural growl, the red glow, and the terrifying knowledge that some paths to truth lead not to enlightenment, but to an ancient, hungry darkness. Some family secrets are not just hidden. Some are actively working to corrupt, waiting for someone to open the door to eternal damnation, forever shadowing the lives of those who witness their unholy power. Some communications are not meant to be heard by individual minds, but by entire species,